So I suppose the question of the hour is, how are you doing? Life has a interesting way, doesn't it, of unfolding situations that allow us to see how realized we really are, and there's nothing like a pandemic to really sort of bring that to the forefront. So how are you? How are you doing? You don't have to answer out loud. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's all just an indicator. What is it that maybe still needs to be looked at? Where am I reacting versus responding? For you see, as we clear out the belief system that causes us to react, the hurts and the related reactions that come from those are the overlays that we put of the people in the past into today's people. All of that stuff keeps us from seeing with a perfect spiritual lens. Remember our theme this year, 2020 vision, seeing with a spiritual lens. We've been working with the Four Agreements. This is a book written by Don Miguel Ruiz. And the premise of this book, as is the premise of virtually every spiritual teaching, is that unless we have begun to do the exploration of these things that stand in the way of us simply being our nature, our Christ nature, then we are not seeing what's going on around us clearly. As Don Miguel says, we are, well, let me put it this way. He says first that what we have the opportunity to be seeing is everything in our life reflecting back love, reflecting back light. And if that's not what we're seeing, then we are being reflected back through a smoky mirror, through a lens that is not quite clear. We've talked about the Four Agreements, and the premise of this book is if that we can begin to adopt and practice, and I emphasize the word practice because if you're working them, you know it's probably going to be a lifelong practice of living from these four simple agreements. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. And as Sue beautifully taught last week, and always do your best. That by following these four agreements, that it's going to highlight for us anything that's not in alignment with the truth and begin to wipe that lens clean. That we'll be able to see with a clear, spiritual, 2020 vision lens. So today we move into breaking old agreements. I grew up in a unity that said nearly constantly, just let it go. But what we're discovering is that there's a whole mechanism within our ego structure that keeps us from just letting it go, that needs to be worked, and needs to be worked consciously and directly in order for us to transcend, transform old patterns into new freedom. And the main culprit that holds it all together is the judge. And I love talking about the judge. And the reason for that is that when I was exposed to the judge, I suppose probably about 20 to 23 years ago, it changed my life. I live a very different life experience than I did before that time. I want everyone to know about the judge. The judge is a part of our ego structure that holds us to a standard that is unachievable, that has all sorts of rules for us and enforces those rules ruthlessly in us. We know when we have gone against the book of rules, as Don Miguel says, of the judge, because we hurt. It hurts us in our upper belly and our solar plexus, and we don't like to hurt. So we tend to go along with the rules, but they're not our rules. They're rules that were indoctrinated into us by our parents, by the church we grew in, by the culture we grew up in. We have learned to conform. Of course, as a kid, a certain amount of that is important, right? If we didn't have the judge as a kid, we would be living in a very different culture right now. It would be hard for us to come together in cities, even any kind of community, because the energy of a child needs to be brought in, needs to be controlled. But we're adults now, and we still live by that judge. Don Miguel has an interesting comment about the judge. The problem with most people is that they live their lives and never discover that the judge and the victim rule their mind, and therefore they don't have a chance to be free. Now, he mentions the victim in here. I just want to point out that from a unity teaching, that's our inner child, an unsupported inner child. Don Miguel tends to, in this chapter, to hold the child out as our nature. We would take exception to that. But here's what he says, and there's quite a bit of truth to it. The real you is still a little child who never grew up. Sometimes that little child comes out when you're having fun or playing, when you feel happy, when you're painting or writing poetry or playing the piano or expressing yourself in some way. These are the happiest moments of our life, when the real you comes out, when you don't care about the past, you don't worry about the future, you're childlike. You get the sense, right, that he's almost talking about our child as if it's our true nature. And we don't hold that in unity. And my personal experience is the same, that our child is a very important part in us. The child captures wonderful energies that are at least initially captures. As we begin to see them and work them, they're actually freed up. But those energies are energies like love, and the child is great at not only curiosity, but creativity. The child brings tremendous spontaneity and a fearlessness to us. These are all qualities that tend to make our life fun and rich. And also, through that curiosity, an opportunity to continue to experience life from many different dimensions. When that child is supported, we experience, or have the potential at least, to experience all those qualities I mentioned. But when the child is attacked, and you see our inner child has no defenses, it's innocent, it hurts when it's attacked, and it really hurts. That's the pain that we feel when we experience judgment. Then it becomes what Don Miguel calls the victim. It is the helpless, wanting to be taken care of, wanting life to conform to it, wanting just to be free of the attack, whether it's internal or external. Don Miguel does something that I also am constantly trying to do. The challenge, the reason that we don't recognize the judge is that it's so much a part of our inner voice. And we haven't been taught to discern. We haven't even really been taught to discern the child, to discern the judge, to discern the pusher. There's so many entities within our ego structure, and including our true nature, right? That they are different energies, different voices for us to get to know. And so, as a spiritual counselor or as an author like Don Miguel, we're always trying to find something that will kind of help you wake up. I always like to use the analogy, if you walked by a kid that was getting beat up by a big bully, would you just stand there and watch? No. You would do something, right? Or he uses the analogy of a parasite and says there's a parasite that's feeding on you. A parasite is a living being who lives off the other living being, sucking their energy without any useful contribution in return and hurting their host little by little. We got a parasite inside of us. We try to give you these dramatic illustrations because the judge has quite a hold on us. You see, one of the main things that the judge was to bring down in us, to control in us, was our strength. Our essential quality of strength allows us to know our truth, allows us to stand in our truth, allows us to call BS when it's BS, allows us to really align with who we are. And yet, the judge is going to get riled up if we come out in a strong way, in a powerful way. And yet, we need that quality to shut the judge down, to be able to say, stop, or like a kid does, no. You think about a 2 or a 3-year-old, they're really good at that. No, I won't. We need that same kind of energy, that energy that's been domesticated out of us. So let's check in for ourselves. I want you just to pause for a moment and to imagine with me that you have a bat or a tennis racket or something similar to that, something where you can really get a good swing. And I want you to imagine going into your bedroom, and I want you to whack on that bed like there's no tomorrow. And on top of that, I want you to scream or at least say with all the power you can, no. Check it out. Now, I'd love to hear how that is for you. For some people, it's going to be just fine. I can tell you after 20 years or plus years of working with the judge, I have no problem with it at all. But wow, in the beginning, all sorts of experiences came up for me. Feelings of not being acceptable or not being loved, of going, upsetting my mother. Anything can be brought into a belief about being strong, being powerful. Let's see what kind of comments you're making. Will they just be coming up? Okay, they're going to be just coming up. So I'll pause for a minute. Gosh, it's kind of cool. You get to see yourself when you're on this thing. While the comments are coming up, I'll press on. It's important for us to be able to use our strength, not to kill the judge, but to simply set a boundary. Remember, the judge is trying to help us. It just needs to be stopped. Because in truth, and this is the sad part to me, the judge only attacks the child, not any other part of our dynamic of personalities within us. Only the child. And yet the child brings all these wonderful qualities that enhance our life. And so we want to set a boundary with the judge so that we can begin to discover, what am I really? What is it that I really enjoy? Now, there's one other piece. There's a lot in this chapter. I can assure you, I could probably talk for days about the judge. So I've had to really pare it down today. Oh, my phone's jumping around. Does that mean that people are saying things? I can see that a text just came in for me. Let's see if it's... Oh, Stuart says, just pretend that it's your partner. Okay, well, I'm coming home, though, in a few hours, Stuart. We got to have some fun, right? So I want to bring up, though, a piece that Don Miguel offered us that, again, I don't think is, well, I think that it's presented maybe a little too simply in the book. He says that, well, let me just take a step back because I thought this was kind of fun and maybe just a little bit morbid. But what attracted me was, this is in the chapter, part of the chapter that says the initiation of death, embracing the angel of death. Maybe not such a timely subject, right? And yet, at the same time, we know this premise, to live as if this is our last day to live, or to live as if this is our last week. And he said, what are you going to do? He said, well, of course, you're going to either play the victim, you're either going to be an undefended child that is going to be overwhelmed and thinks you need to figure this out and tell everyone that you're dying and, everything, or you're going to come in, set a boundary with your judge, support the child, and you're going to go out and do what you want to do. And he says, why not live your life every day that way? Well, I want to point out that I think that's a bit simplified. Instead of talking about picking something that makes you happy, you'll hear me more often saying, following that which makes you feel more fulfilled. Let me give you an example from my life that may illustrate why I think that terminology is more important. I shared with you years ago that I got asked to be the keynote speaker at Unity's, what do they call it? I think, is it still called the People's Conference or Worldwide Conference? And I initially said yes. But then all of my belief system came up, which is a belief system, of course, that makes me feel like I'm inadequate, that I'm self-separate, that I can be shamed, all the stuff that's unique to or maybe not so unique to my belief system. And a couple of weeks later, just feeling locked up and like I couldn't possibly pull this off, I called them back and said, I'm going to need to pass. Then I went to the conference. And when I heard the talk of the person that they brought in to replace me, I went, oh, I would have liked to have done that. I could have done that. I think I could have done, actually, I thought I could have done a better job. And I realized that if we're going to go just on what makes us happy, just on what feels good, we're not necessarily ever going to step out and challenge the judge. Because I can bet you that if my judge wasn't present in those 2 weeks eating on me that I was never going to be able to pull this off, at least my child was so conditioned not to step out and get my nose cut off that it was saying, that it was in anxiety and victimized by it and saying, I'm being tortured by this and let's get out of it. And so, does that mean that the issues naturally go away? No, they need to be worked. I mean, the funny thing around our house right now is that I've been asked to do one of Silent Unity's healing prayer services. Everything at Unity has now gone to virtual. They do at 11 o'clock in the morning every day a prayer service. They've dramatically shortened it. And so I've just been asked to do a 5-minute little piece. And yet all the issues are up. You would think that I was going to be speaking to millions. I have been tense. I've had this incredible desire to say, call them up and say, I can't do it. But this time, I know that I want to do it. This time, I'm aware that it's just my issues coming up, and I have an opportunity to get the judge off my back, to support the child, which has been interesting. I rarely do much preparation for these talks. Some of you probably already are aware of that. I thought I could just sit down and do a 5-minute prayer. but so much static came up in the field. Tension, anxiety, messages. I mean, the whole quagmire was getting stirred. That I realized I'm going to have to support myself in a different way. Whereas I rarely write out a talk anymore, I actually wrote out a prayer. And in fact, I tried just reading the prayer. That made my child very happy, but came off kind of cardboardy, not what I wanted. So I started just relaxing then into realizing I could write it. Can I say it? And an interesting transition happened for me. Instead of dreading doing it, it was like learning how to play ball. And I wanted to do it over and over again, to the point that Stuart finally said, "Enough of the prayer." The joys of being in a relationship. So I'm curious. I don't know if anybody's gotten back to me. Okay, cool. Let's see what the comments are, and then I'm going to pose another one, and then we'll close it. Whoops. Do I go to Facebook? Yes. All right, let's see what we've got. Tell me what they are, because they're not showing up here. Oh, here they are. No? What did Eileen say? Come to your microphone.
Eileen said, I'm discovering multiple aspects of my personality that often have conflicting needs and desires. I think it's important to honor all aspects of my personality. Everyone gets to have a seat at the table.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And just to know, again, that we're not totally discounting the judge, but the judge can tend to be that entity that never stops talking at the table. And so you're just setting a boundary with it. Stop. Let us have a breath here. Anybody else?
Linda also said, I think this alone time has given my child space to come more alive. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah,
for letting it happen.
That's wonderful. And for some of you, your child may be really feeling cooped in. So again, an opportunity to support the child in a different way.
Jean says, nothing much great or better happens in our comfort zone.
That is so true. Thank you, Jean. Okay. So I want to ask you another question, and we'll see if you can respond as quickly as you can so that we can move on. But do you have an example from your life where you wanted to say yes, but then the committee of limiting beliefs, let's call it, came up, and you did not? And how did it leave you feeling? And if you feel some embarrassment about sharing that, we won't share names on this one. But it's so good to get out of the shadows and just put it out there. Or if you two have something that you want to share, not to put you on the spot. I can hardly imagine Rachel not doing whatever she wanted to do, the courageous woman on our staff. Oh, good. Janice has one to share.
I notice that things come up for me when I'm kind of testing the universe, and I was invited to lead a women's retreat this next fall, and oh my gosh, it's been on like a bucket list forever to be useful and fulfilled in that way. And man, as soon as I got the call, it was like, no way, I'm way too busy. I've got way too much else going on. I couldn't possibly do that, to the point that I even, I missed the call. Like I stood them up when I was supposed to talk to the committee. And boy, that brought up for me, it brought up shame, and it brought up also a question of like, do I really want what I say that I want? And I loved what you said about if it's going to make me happy as opposed to if it's going to make me feel more purposeful.
Yeah.
So it really felt like a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful, Janice. Thank you for being vulnerable with us. That is a great example. Okay, good. Here's one that says, I've done that often and have found myself regretting not taking action. That's a huge piece, right? Regret is a great indicator that that was an opportunity for us. Lots of people giving me thumbs up on this. Yeah, good. Let's see. I think that's, do you see anything else, Rachel, on there? Okay, good. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm noticing as that almost all my life is in front of a screen now, that it can become tiring. And so our intent today is not to run anywhere near an hour. It's time for me to bring this to a close. Have fun this week playing with the judge. Maybe it's time to pull out that tennis racket or that bat and beat on it just to let your body reconnect with what it's like to be strong, to be powerful, so that you can use that energy to really come at the judge from the place of stop, enough, and then begin to work with the child within, to support that child, so that you too can come to a place where you're bringing a childlike joy, spontaneity, creativity, and love to the new experiences of your life, breaking the old agreements. All right. Let's move into some meditation, shall we? Thank you. I was thinking it was music. See, I'm conditioned, right? Take a nice deep breath again. We're going to move into that same kind of place that we moved into the opening prayer. And we're going to spend just a couple of minutes reconnecting. I want you to notice that when you're not being pushed on, when you're not being prodded, how that when you turn within, it's quiet, it's still, it's peaceful. This is the resting state of your nature, ready to leap into action as you. But this is a totally trusting, relaxed state, fearless, courageous. And so, when it's not needed, it's quiet. We're quiet. We're peaceful.